There are moments in history when the atmosphere itself feels charged, when something invisible begins moving beneath the surface of ordinary life, and the people sensitive enough to feel energy before it manifests physically start realizing that reality is no longer operating by the old rules. Today is one of those moments. This is not just another Sunday drifting quietly across the calendar. What is unfolding above you right now carries the kind of intensity that can permanently alter the direction of a human life, but only for those willing to recognize the doorway while it is still open. On May 24th, at exactly 10:20 at night, the Sun and Neptune form a flawless geometric connection under conditions so rare that this exact energetic combination has not emerged for more than 100 years. That matters more than most people understand. This is not a simple astrological transit that comes and goes without consequence. This alignment functions like a spiritual threshold, a bridge suspended between the invisible realm of intuition and the physical reality you touch every day. And if the last several days have felt strange to you, if your inner world has suddenly become louder than your external circumstances, if flashes of understanding have been arriving without warning, or dreams have been hitting with such emotional intensity that they feel more like memories than imagination, there is a reason for it. You are not losing your grip on reality. You are becoming aware of frequencies most people spend their entire lives ignoring. Later, the deeper meaning behind that experience will become clear, but first, you need to understand that this process did not begin today. The portal already started opening 3 days ago, and your mind, your nervous system, and your spirit have been responding to it ever since Wednesday, whether you realized it or not. The energy building throughout the week has been reshaping your internal landscape in preparation for what arrives now. And almost nobody is explaining the real magnitude of what this means. There are 3 zodiac signs standing directly in the center of this current, positioned for breakthrough so dramatic that the next 6 months of their lives may divide into 2 distinct chapters, before this weekend and after it. Unexpected opportunities, timeline shifts, encounters that redirect destiny itself, the kind of changes that appear sudden only because people fail to see how long the universe has been arranging them behind the scenes. The frightening part is that many people will miss this entirely because they are still trying to interpret spiritual transformation through logic alone. They will dismiss the signs, ignore the inner pull, and walk away from one of the most powerful energetic openings of the year without realizing what was placed in front of them. So the real question becomes whether you are one of the people meant to receive this activation, because if you are, and you hesitate now, you may spend months looking back at this exact weekend, realizing your entire future could have changed here. The shift actually began on Wednesday, May 22nd, and even though most of the world moved through that day without noticing anything unusual, spiritually sensitive people absolutely felt the disturbance. At exactly 10:30 in the morning, the Sun collided with Uranus in Gemini at the exact same degree, creating an energetic shockwave that moved through the collective consciousness like electricity tearing across the sky. This was not soft energy. This was not subtle intuition. A Uranus cazimi is the kind of cosmic event that dismantles psychological structures in an instant. It forces awakening whether you are prepared or not. It exposes illusions so quickly that your mind struggles to keep up with the realization of how much of your identity has been built around outdated beliefs, inherited fears, and narratives that no longer belong to the person you are becoming. Many people felt this as sudden restlessness, mental overstimulation, emotional unpredictability, or the sensation that reality itself had become unstable. But beneath that discomfort was liberation. Uranus does not arrive to comfort you. Uranus arrives to break the prison doors open. Since Wednesday, some part of you has been seeing life differently. Maybe conversations suddenly revealed hidden truths. Maybe you caught yourself questioning patterns you once accepted automatically. Maybe old ambitions stopped making sense overnight. That was not random chaos. That was preparation. Because before vision can enter your life, illusion has to collapse first. Uranus stripped away the static, shattered the resistance, and disrupted the false certainty that kept you mentally trapped inside smaller versions of yourself. If your thoughts have been racing since then, if realizations have been striking you out of nowhere, if it feels like your brain is processing reality at a speed your emotions are still trying to catch up with, understand this. Clearly, your inner operating system is recalibrating. The lightning already struck. Now comes the transmission. Because today, the Sun forms a perfect 60-degree sextile with Neptune in Aries, and this energy functions completely differently. Uranus awakens. Neptune reveals. Uranus breaks apart the old structure. Neptune opens the spiritual field beyond it. The Sun represents your conscious identity, the core of who you believe yourself to be, while Neptune governs dreams, intuition, symbolism, spiritual perception, and the invisible language of the soul. When these two energies align harmoniously, the boundary between rational thought and cosmic intelligence becomes thin enough for messages to pass through directly. Today, the universe is not communicating through facts, logic, or predictable explanations. It is speaking through emotion, imagery, instinct, synchronicity, and sudden knowing. And that is why so many people are experiencing vivid dreams, emotional waves, and unexplained intuitive flashes right now. Neptune has already been broadcasting the signal, and your subconscious has been receiving it before your conscious mind could even understand what was happening. This is the moment where everything begins making sense. Those strange feelings, those sudden inner visions, those moments where you felt connected to something larger than yourself, were not coincidences. Your intuition was tuning into the frequency early. But what makes today truly extraordinary is the role Gemini now plays in this equation. Neptune brings the vision, limitless, emotional, symbolic, impossible to fully contain. But the Sun in Gemini provides something equally important, the language to express it. Suddenly, the thoughts you could not articulate begin forming into words. The feelings you could barely understand begin organizing into clarity. Ideas arrive with structure. Messages become easier to communicate. It becomes possible not only to receive the vision, but to explain it, share it, write it down, and finally understand what your soul has been trying to show you all along. And for many people watching this, that realization alone is going to become the turning point that changes everything moving forward. What you are witnessing now is the hidden architecture behind the phenomenon people casually describe as speaking reality into existence. But most people never truly understand what that phrase means. This is not empty positivity, and it is not shallow manifestation language repeated for comfort. What is happening in the sky today reflects a far more precise process, the fusion of spiritual vision with conscious expression. The exact moment inspiration descends from the invisible realm and becomes structured enough to enter physical life through language itself. That is why this energy feels so intense right now. Somewhere deep inside you, something has been trying to emerge, not just as a feeling, but as a message, a direction, a declaration. Your soul can no longer keep silent. And the reason this moment carries such extraordinary power is because Neptune is no longer operating from the same energetic terrain humanity has grown used to over the last 14 years. For more than a decade, Neptune traveled through Pisces, its natural domain, saturating the collective atmosphere with themes of escapism, emotional dissolution, fantasy, spiritual drifting, and the desire to disappear into something larger than the self. That period taught people how to dream, but it also tempted them to avoid reality. It blurred boundaries until many lost touch with their own agency. It created entire spiritual movements centered around surrender, softness, passivity, and waiting for signs from the universe before making a move. But on January 26th of this year, the frequency shifted completely. Neptune crossed into Aries, and from that moment forward, the spiritual climate of the world changed direction. Neptune in Aries does not sit quietly hoping life transforms on its own. It does not ask you to remain hidden while waiting for permission from fate. This placement ignites a radically different kind of spiritual energy, one rooted in action, courage, initiative, and fierce personal conviction. This is the rise of the spiritual warrior, the individual who receives intuitive guidance and then dares to move on it instead of endlessly contemplating it. Neptune in Aries wants movement. It wants boldness. It wants people willing to build lives aligned with their inner truth, rather than simply fantasizing about what could be possible someday. And today, as the Gemini Sun forms its exact sextile to Neptune in Aries, that energy becomes impossible to ignore. Because Gemini governs thought, communication, language, and the transmission of ideas, while Aries governs initiation and fearless self-assertion. Together, they create a current that pushes hidden visions out of silence and into expression. The universe is essentially asking one direct and uncomfortable question. Today, what truth has been forming inside your consciousness? And why are you still afraid to speak it out loud? That question is hitting people harder than they realize because deep down many already know the answer. They have felt the visions. They have sensed the calling. They have received intuitive flashes about the direction their life wants to take. But they continue hesitating at the threshold between knowing and declaring. And that is where most manifestations die. Not because the vision was false, but because fear prevented articulation. People love dreaming privately because dreams remain safe when they stay unspoken. The moment you speak them, they become vulnerable to judgment, rejection, failure, and change. But today's portal was never designed for silent wishing. It was designed for embodiment. Aries supplies the fire, the raw instinctive force pushing you toward a new reality, while Gemini gives that force structure through words, plans, communication, and conscious thought. Together, they complete the circuit. Vision transforms into language. Language transforms into intention. And intention begins altering physical reality itself. That is the real mechanism unfolding beneath this transit. But before you allow yourself to get swept away by the excitement of this energy, there is something extremely important you need to understand, because another aspect is still hanging heavily over this entire portal, and if you ignore it, today can become just as dangerous as it is powerful. Earlier Wednesday morning at exactly 2:30 at night, Venus formed a difficult square to Neptune, and that influence remains active right now alongside the Sun-Neptune sextile. This is where discernment becomes absolutely essential. Venus square. Neptune is one of the most intoxicatingly deceptive alignments in astrology because it distorts emotional perception so convincingly that fantasy starts feeling more believable than truth. It creates idealization. It makes people see what they desperately want to see, instead of what is actually present. Under this energy, red flags suddenly look romantic, instability feels exciting, and wishful thinking disguises itself as intuition. This aspect seduces people into projecting savior fantasies onto situations that are deeply flawed beneath the surface. It whispers that impossible outcomes are guaranteed simply because the emotional chemistry feels overwhelming. And that is why this portal carries two radically different potentials at the same time. Used consciously, it becomes one of the strongest visionary manifestation windows of the entire year. Used recklessly, it becomes an illusion trap capable of leading people deeper into self-deception than they have been in months. So hear this clearly. Today is not the day for impulsive external commitments. It is not the day to sign contracts based entirely on emotional excitement. It is not the day to make major financial decisions simply because something feels spiritually aligned in the moment. And it is definitely not the day to rush headfirst into romantic entanglements with people you barely understand just because the chemistry feels otherworldly. The purpose of today is not reckless execution. The purpose is reception, reflection, documentation, translation. This is the day to capture the downloads arriving through your intuition before they disappear back into the unconscious. Write them down. Record the thoughts arriving unexpectedly. Speak your realizations into voice memos. Journal the emotional patterns surfacing now. Sketch the blueprint of the vision beginning to emerge. But allow time before turning those revelations into irreversible action. Let reality breathe around them first. Let the emotional fog settle. Let discernment catch up with inspiration. Fortunately, the cosmos already provided a stabilizing force earlier in the week. Wednesday afternoon, Mercury formed a sextile to Saturn, and that aspect offered the grounding necessary to navigate this portal without losing yourself inside illusion. Mercury sextile. Saturn sharpens critical thinking, structure, discipline, and rational evaluation. It gives you the ability to question your own emotional impulses instead of blindly trusting every feeling that arises. Use that energy now. Examine the visions coming through with honesty. Test them against practical reality. Ask yourself whether what you are receiving carries long-term truth or merely temporary emotional intoxication. Because divine guidance and beautiful delusion can feel almost identical in the beginning, the difference reveals itself through patience and grounded observation. Then yesterday, Friday, May 23rd, another important energetic shift arrived when the moon entered Virgo and formed a first-quarter square to the Sun. If you suddenly felt pressure building around practical responsibilities, organization, health, routines, or unfinished tasks, that was not random stress appearing out of nowhere. It was preparation. A first quarter. Moon always represents a crisis of action, the moment intentions collide with reality and demand tangible effort instead of passive dreaming. In Virgo, that pressure becomes deeply practical. It pushes you to clean your environment, regulate your habits, organize your schedule, manage your health, and restore order to the details of daily life. And that matters enormously right now because the visions moving through this portal require a stable container to hold them. Inspiration cannot root itself inside complete chaos. If your environment is overwhelmed, your mind scattered, and your nervous system exhausted, you will struggle to hear the subtle guidance trying to reach you. Virgo's role in this story is not glamorous, but it is essential. It reminds you that spiritual insight without grounded structure dissolves before it can become reality. The universe is not only opening your intuition right now, it is also testing whether your life is organized enough to sustain the future you keep asking for. That Virgo moon was never simply about productivity or checking responsibilities off a list. What happened yesterday was far more intentional than most people realize. The pressure you felt to organize your surroundings, clean your space, restructure your routines, or finally deal with the details you had been avoiding was part of the preparation process itself. The universe was not trying to overwhelm you. It was trying to clear the noise. Because when a portal like this opens, the visions arriving through it need somewhere stable to land. Inspiration cannot anchor itself inside confusion. If your life remains cluttered physically, emotionally, or mentally, even the most powerful intuitive breakthrough can dissolve before it ever becomes reality. That is why so many spiritually gifted people struggle to manifest what they receive. They hear the message, but they do not create the structure necessary to hold it. Yesterday's Virgo energy was correcting that imbalance. It was making space. It was removing distractions. It was reorganizing your inner and outer world, so that when today's Sun-Neptune sextile finally reached its peak, you would be ready to receive something meaningful instead of letting it disappear beneath chaos and overstimulation. So if you suddenly felt compelled to clean your room, reorganize your schedule, write down your thoughts, return to healthier habits, or regain control over your daily environment. Understand that your intuition was already responding to the shift before your conscious mind fully understood why. You were preparing the soil. And now, today, the seeds arrive. But this portal is not affecting everyone equally, based on the houses activated by the Sun, Neptune's sextile, the larger outer planet configurations, and the entire astrological architecture shaping late May of 2026. There are 3 zodiac signs standing directly at the center of this acceleration point. And if you have major placements in any of these signs, what unfolds during this period may feel less like coincidence and more like destiny abruptly changing direction in front of your eyes. This is not subtle movement. This is timeline expansion happening in real time. Libra, your entire world is about to widen in ways you never anticipated, and the strangest part is that it may initially feel too unreal to trust. With Uranus having recently entered your 9th house of expansion, higher learning philosophy and long-distance exploration, while Neptune simultaneously activates your 7th house of relationships and partnerships. Today's Sun-Neptune sextile creates a direct, energetic bridge between awakening and connection. Something is preparing to enter your life that completely disrupts the direction you thought you were heading, but not in a destructive way, in the exact opposite way. This is the kind of shift that forces you to realize how small your previous vision had become. For some Libras, this may arrive through an unexpected invitation involving travel, education, teaching, publishing, or exposure to a completely new perspective that changes your understanding of what your future could look like. For others, this energy manifests through a relationship appearing with uncanny timing, either romantic or professional, carrying the strange feeling that the universe orchestrated the meeting long before either person became aware of it. But here is the challenge for you, Libra. This portal is asking you to loosen your grip on certainty, and that is deeply uncomfortable for someone who naturally seeks balance, predictability, and carefully weighed decisions. You prefer to analyze every possible outcome before moving forward. You like having emotional equilibrium. You like knowing where things are going. But this energy does not want perfect planning from you. It wants trust. It wants openness. It wants you to recognize that some opportunities enter your life precisely because they could never have been logically predicted in advance. Right now, the universe is trying to place something larger in front of you than anything your current strategy could have produced alone. But if you become too attached to controlling every detail, you may talk yourself out of the very thing your soul has been asking for. That is why timing matters so much. When the offer appears, whether through a person, a message, a sudden realization, or a completely unexpected opening, your task is not endless analysis. Your task is recognition. And once you recognize it, you must have the courage to respond before fear disguises itself as logic and convinces you to retreat back into familiarity. Scorpio, your story during this portal feels completely different because you have already endured the emotional storm required to reach this point. The full moon in your sign on May 1st was not gentle. It forced confrontation with emotional patterns you thought you had already healed. It exposed buried resentment, hidden power struggles, lingering attachments, and forms of emotional exhaustion you had been carrying quietly beneath the surface. For many Scorpios, that lunation felt almost unbearable, because it demanded radical honesty about wounds that were still influencing your choices behind the scenes. But what you need to understand now is that the intensity of that experience was not punishment, it was purification. It was clearing space for what is arriving during this current window, because now the energy begins shifting from emotional survival into tangible redirection. Venus recently entered Cancer in your 9th house, while Mars remains steady in Taurus in your 7th house, creating a much more supportive emotional foundation than what you have been navigating over the past several weeks. And as today's Sun-Neptune sextile activates both your 8th house of transformation and shared resources alongside your 6th house connected to work, health, and daily systems, your intuition becomes deeply practical instead of abstract. This is important because the guidance arriving now is not meant to remain a fantasy. It wants embodiment. You may suddenly recognize how to turn a hidden talent into something materially sustainable. You may receive clarity about a partnership or financial entanglement that has remained emotionally confusing for months. You may intuitively discover routines, health changes, or lifestyle adjustments capable of transforming your physical energy in ways you did not expect. And perhaps, most importantly, you may finally feel the emotional certainty that your suffering was not meaningless. Scorpio, this portal carries the feeling of cosmic reward after prolonged internal labor. All the shadow work, all the emotional purging, all the painful self-confrontation prepared you for this exact moment. The universe is no longer trying to break you apart. It is trying to redirect you towards something healthier, more aligned, and far more sustainable than what you were clinging to before. But to receive it, you must stop resisting the possibility that life could genuinely become better than the reality you have grown accustomed to surviving. Capricorn. Your experience of this portal may feel the most unsettling of all, precisely because it challenges the identity you rely on most heavily. Yesterday's first quarter, Moon in Virgo, activated your 9th house of meaning, philosophy, and long-term direction, already pressuring you to reevaluate what truly matters beyond achievement alone. And now, today's Sun-Neptune sextile pushes that process even deeper by forcing a confrontation between strategy and emotional truth. Capricorn. You are extraordinarily skilled at building structure. You understand discipline, patience, sacrifice, and long-term planning better than almost anyone. You know how to construct a future piece by piece through consistency and control. But Neptune does not operate according to carefully measured timelines. Neptune asks a far more dangerous question. What does your soul actually want beneath all the goals, responsibilities, and expectations you have built your identity around? And that question can feel terrifying because the answer often refuses to fit inside practical logic. The vision arriving through this portal may completely disrupt the future you believed made the most sense. It may involve creativity instead of security. It may involve love instead of strategy. It may involve risk instead of certainty. For some Capricorns, this appears as a creative calling that cannot immediately justify itself financially. For others, it manifests through a relationship that does not align with the practical standards you usually depend on when making emotional decisions. And for some, it arrives as a leap of faith, demanding trust in something invisible before physical evidence appears. That discomfort you feel around the vision is not necessarily a warning sign. In many cases, it is the exact evidence that your heart is leading you somewhere your logical mind has never allowed itself to explore before. And that is why this portal matters so much for you. Because for perhaps the first time in a very long time, life is asking you to build a future not only from discipline and control, but from emotional truth as well. The Virgo moon was never punishing you with pressure or overwhelming you with responsibilities for no reason. It was preparing the container before the miracle arrived. Every urge you felt yesterday to clean your room, organize your schedule, reset your habits, throw away old clutter, or finally regain control over the small details of your life was part of a much larger energetic preparation happening beneath the surface. The universe understood something your conscious mind may not have realized yet. A vision this powerful cannot root itself inside chaos. Divine insight needs structure. Spiritual downloads need grounding. If your environment is overwhelmed, if your nervous system is exhausted, if your life is scattered in every direction, even the clearest guidance can dissolve before it ever has the chance to become real. That is why yesterday mattered so much. The Virgo energy was clearing space internally and externally, so that when today's portal fully activated, your spirit would finally have somewhere stable to place the vision, instead of watching it disappear into distraction and confusion. So if you spent yesterday journaling, reorganizing your routines, handling neglected responsibilities, cleaning your space, or trying to restore order to your emotional world, understand that you were already participating in the preparation process. You were making room for the future before it arrived. And today, the seeds finally enter the ground. But what is unfolding now will not affect everyone in the same way. Certain signs stand directly beneath the center of this acceleration point, and for them the next several days could feel like reality suddenly speeding up. Based on the specific houses activated by today's Sun-Neptune sextile, the recent outer planet movements, and the larger energetic architecture shaping late May of 2026, 3 zodiac signs emerge as the strongest receivers of this breakthrough frequency. And if you have major placements in any of these signs, pay very close attention, because what arrives now is not subtle. This is the kind of shift that changes your direction so completely that months from now you will look back at this exact weekend and realize it was the moment everything started moving differently. Libra, your breakthrough arrives through expansion you never saw coming. And at first, it may feel so unexpected that your logical mind struggles to trust it. Uranus has recently entered your 9th house of exploration, higher learning, philosophy, and expansion, while Neptune now activates your 7th house of relationships and partnerships. Today's Sun-Neptune sextile creates a bridge between awakening and connection, between sudden realization and the people capable of changing your future. Something is approaching your life that has the power to completely redirect your current trajectory in ways you could not have planned in advance. For some Libras, this appears as an opportunity connected to travel, education, teaching, publishing, or exposure to an entirely new worldview that awakens something sleeping inside you. For others, it arrives through a person, someone who enters your life carrying the strange feeling of destiny, as though the meeting itself was arranged long before either of you became aware of it. And this is where the challenge begins for you, Libra, because this portal requires surrender, not control. You naturally want balance, certainty, and careful evaluation before making life-changing choices. You prefer understanding every possible outcome before taking action, but this energy is not asking you to calculate every detail. It is asking you to trust what your soul recognizes before your mind can explain it. The opportunity approaching now may not fit neatly inside your current plans, and that is exactly why it matters. Something larger than your strategy is trying to reach you, but if you become too attached to your existing blueprint, you risk missing the very thing capable of transforming your future. The universe is preparing to place an unexpected offer in front of you, and your responsibility is not endless analysis. Your responsibility is recognition. When the door opens, whether through a conversation, an invitation, a realization, or a sudden shift in direction, you must be brave enough to say yes before fear disguises itself as logic and convinces you to retreat back into familiarity. Scorpio, your energy during this portal feels deeply emotional because you already survived the storm required to reach this point. The full moon in your sign on May 1st forced you into intense emotional confrontation. It exposed hidden wounds, unresolved attachments, buried resentment, toxic cycles, and power struggles you thought you had already moved beyond. That lunation was not gentle. For many Scorpios, it felt emotionally exhausting, even devastating at times, because it forced honesty where avoidance was no longer possible. But now, the energy shifts. That emotional purge was not the ending. It was preparation. And this weekend represents the reward after the release. Venus recently entered Cancer in your 9th house, while Mars remains grounded in Taurus in your 7th, creating a far more supportive atmosphere than the emotional intensity you have been navigating recently. As today's Sun-Neptune sextile activates your 8th house of transformation and shared resources, alongside your 6th house of daily routines, health, and work, your intuition becomes incredibly practical. This is not fantasy-based guidance. This is usable clarity. You may subtly realize how to transform a hidden skill into something financially sustainable. You may receive insight about a complicated partnership or financial situation that has remained emotionally unclear for months. You may discover a new routine, lifestyle shift, or health practice that dramatically changes your physical and emotional energy. Most importantly, you may finally understand that everything you endured emotionally was reshaping you for something better than the reality you were desperately trying to hold on to before. Scorpio, the universe is no longer tearing things away from you. It is trying to redirect you toward a future that actually matches the person you have become through all this transformation. But in order to receive it, you must stop expecting pain every time life begins opening a new door. Capricorn, your experience of this portal may feel the most uncomfortable because it challenges the identity structure you rely on most heavily.